Hello and welcome into this Tuesday, July 22nd edition of the League Winners Fantasy Show. My name is Dalton Salings, and today we will be diving into the NFC South, breaking down the Falcons, Panthers, Saints, and Buccaneers. Training camp is just getting started. Players are starting to report. We're seeing highlights all over the place. Everybody's in the best shape of their lives, and I am very excited with the NFL football season right around the corner, meaning fantasy drafts are almost upon us. Today with the NFC South, kicking it off, going to dive right in with the Atlanta Falcons. Just to start us off at quarterback, Michael Penix, he's supposed to be the starter the whole season. Kirk Cousins is still on the roster. Michael Penix Jr. is the starter here. I don't know what to think about him. He showed bright things last year. A lot of people are very excited about him as a player. I think he's going to do enough for the guys on this team to be successful. I don't think he himself will be fantasy relevant. I'm treating him a bit like a rookie quarterback, similarly to how I'm treating J.J. McCarthy from yesterday's Vikings NFC North video. I think he's not going to throw a lot of touchdowns. I think he'll get enough yards and not do a lot on the ground. Won't be very fantasy relevant, but I think he does just enough to keep some guys on his team as potentially ones at their position. And to start that off, Bijan Robinson is the name that needs to be talked about. A potential to finish the season is the RB1 overall. I have him projected at number 2 right now, but I think he has absolutely the upside to be the number one running back. Have him for over 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns, as well as another 400 yards through the air. I think he's going to get the ball a lot. I have him for over 360 total touches on the season. He is the engine on this team. I think he's a phenomenal player as well. The other running back is Tyler Algier, who's still got legs to him, but isn't real competition. I think Algier does just enough to be interesting. I have him for about 600 yards and 3 touchdowns, but I do think Bijan Robinson is the clear one. I think he's the best pass catcher on this team as well, not just the best running back, but also probably the best pass catcher. And I expect him to have a phenomenal season and potentially finish the year as the RB1. When it comes to the wide receivers, I have Drake London right now just outside of my top 12 wide receivers. So I don't have him as a 1, but I think he has the upside to be a 1 if Penix can get him the ball enough. Have him for a lot of targets. There's not a lot of weapons on this team. They've spent a lot of first round and early draft capital on offensive skill position players recently, the Falcons have. But outside of those top 4 or 5 guys, there's not a lot of depth on this team. So I'm expecting Drake London to get a lot of targets. Have him for about 87 catches, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I think a very good season. I think if Michael Penix can increase those touchdown numbers, Drake London would be the beneficiary of that and could get to double digits. But if Michael Penix has the season I'm projecting, I don't think anyone's going to be able to get that many touchdowns from him. Darnell Mooney's the other big receiver on this team. Have about 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think he gets a lot of the targets as well. He's a very clear wide receiver too, and a very strong player. I've liked him since he's been in Chicago. He really hasn't had great quarterback play. Last season with Cousins, he looked very good. I expect that to continue with Penix. It'll be interesting to see how his yards per reception are affected by the younger quarterback. Is he taking the top off even more than Kirk Cousins was? Or is he going to dial it back, be a little bit more conservative, hit those dump-offs to guys like Bijan Robinson and get them those targets? Right now, I think Darnell Mooney is a very good year. And Ray McCloud, the wide receiver 3 over there, came in higher in my projections than I expected. I'm actually kind of draftable, a little over 7 fantasy points per game in the PPR format for my projections, which is right around a lot of the tight ends. Late round target, Ray McCloud, absolutely an option there. Almost 600 yards is what I've projected for. And once again, similar touchdown problem. I don't think he scores much because I don't think Penix throws that many touchdowns. But if Michael Penix comes out and surprises, guys, all 3 of those wide receivers could be even higher than I have them projected because of that touchdown upside. The tight end, any fantasy player has probably been burned by Kyle Pitts at some point in his career. I have him right around 8 fantasy points a game again this year. I projected him in the same kind of range. I have him at my tight end 16, a tight end 2 option. He's in a range of tight ends, and I'll go over this more in a tight end specific video, but he's in a range of tight ends where I wouldn't be mad if I ended up with Kyle Pitts. I think he's a good player. I think he has the skill set to succeed in the NFL. He just hasn't been able to thus far. It will be interesting to see if that becomes a problem again this year, or if maybe Michael Penix is the solution to this. If he gets the targets, he still has upside as a very skilled football player. But like I said, I've around 8 fantasy points a game, tight end 16, not a guy I'm absolutely targeting, but a guy with upside who you could look to if you believe in this offense. A lot of who you draft on this team is going to come down to, do you believe in this offense? Do you believe in Michael Penix Jr.? If you do, the Falcons are guys you want to target. A lot of people do believe, and Drake London is going to go very high in drafts because of that. Bijan Robinson, of course, regardless of what Michael Penix does, Bijan is going to be a good player. But Drake London's, Darnell Mooney's, Kyle Pitts are going to be really dependent on Michael Penix Jr. I'm not the biggest believer, but I do like the Falcons this year and their pass-catching options. The next team up is going to be the Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young had a bit of a second-half resurgence last year. He got benched, came back, and played very well. I expect that good play to continue. Maybe not grow. I think he could throw for 3,500 yards and 22 touchdowns, be a fine fantasy quarterback, not good, not really even draftable. I have him around the bottom half of the league, where I had a lot of the guys in the NFC North, actually, but I'm in the bottom half of the league. I think he does enough, but there's so many options for him to throw the ball to. I think he could exceed these numbers, but I don't think he's fantasy relevant even if he does. He was extremely fantasy relevant last year. I think teams are more prepared for him and what he's going to be capable of this year, and he won't have the same success. When it comes to those weapons, they drafted Teratoa McMillan. I'm going to call him Tat McMillan because it's easy to pronounce, but McMillan out of Arizona this year. He was my favorite wide receiver prospect in the class. I like him a lot, and I think he could have a very good rookie season. I have him for about just over 10.5 fantasy points per game. I'm ahead of Darnell Mooney, actually, just as a little balancing measure there. But I think he's a very good player. I'm for about 850 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think he's the wide receiver 1 on that team. I have him coming in right behind Rome Odunze, who was talked about yesterday. I'm at my wide receiver 34. So just inside the wide receiver 3 range, kind of a flex player. I think he could have a very strong season. The only question is, does the pure number of weapons, without having seen him play in the NFL, I don't know if he'll be ahead above those guys. Some of the names there: Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, Hunter Renfrow is new to the team there. Obviously, a lot of retired players have good things to say about him. And then we also have Tommy Tremble and Jatavion Sanders, younger tight end. Tommy Tremble, same there. A lot of pass-catching options, a lot of mouths to feed, but none of them very dominant. Similar to what we saw in Green Bay with all of their wide receiver options. I think the Panthers could have a similar problem, but I expect Tat McMillan to raise a little bit above it and be the wide receiver 1 this year, and I hope he actually does. I think it'd be very entertaining for football and very good for fantasy. He is probably my favorite rookie wide receiver to be targeting in drafts, just because of that fact that he could be the one, and Bryce Young has looked better. Some of the other wide receivers, I have Adam Thielen as the second in targets on this team. I think he's going to go out and get targets. I think Xavier Legette's going to get targets, but the question is, can he catch the ball? Can Xavier Legette improve on his catch percentage, which was atrociously low last year? But I think he could be a touchdown guy. Those are going to be the 3 receivers I expect to see in those 3 wide receiver sets for the Panthers. Outside of that, I don't really think either of the tight ends are playable, or the other 2 wide receivers are. But if you want to take a shot on a Xavier Legette, he has upside. If he ends up being the 2 on this team and Bryce Young takes another step, he would be very valuable for fantasy. He's going to be going very late in drafts as well. The running game is interesting. Chuba Hubbard is back from last year, but they brought in Rico Dowdle, who, if you remember, last year rushed for 1,000 yards with the Dallas Cowboys, now came in to be the RB2. They also drafted Trevor Etienne out of Georgia and previously before that Florida. So they have a 3-headed monster at running back, but Chuba Hubbard is still the one here. I have him for the most carries, but I do think Rico Dowdle cuts into his work, and he's not as strong as he was last year. I'm for about 700 yards and 6 touchdowns, as well as another 225 through the air. Rico Dowdle, 630 yards and 200 yards through the air. So I think that they kind of take away from each other. I think it'll be very successful. If I was a Panthers fan, I'd be very excited about it. For fantasy, neither guy is really great. If I had to take one, I'm probably taking Dowdle because he's going to go later, but he's proven he's a good player. I think he could step up if Hubbard goes down. If Chuba Hubbard goes down, Rico Dowdle's a great player, but I think that he has more upside because of the draft capital that's going to be required than the Chuba Hubbard does, who will be going probably in the top 24 running backs, which is about where I have them projected. Looking at it, I have him just outside of RB27 for Chuba Hubbard, whereas I have Rico Dowdle at 42. So that there's definitely a gap there, but I do think Rico Dowdle has more upside and is a guy that you might want to grab late, whereas Chuba Hubbard would actually cost you more valuable draft capital, and you could get somebody potentially with more upside than Chuba Hubbard has because of the fact that Rico Dowdle is there. I don't love this Panthers offense, but Tat McMillan is really the guy I'm targeting from this team. The New Orleans Saints are a bit of a dumpster fire. Derek Carr retired, which means the rookie Tyler Shaw, I'm gonna butcher that last name, but the rookie out of Louisville is taking over at quarterback, and he is going to be a rookie quarterback. I think he can throw the ball well. I think he's a fine player. I don't think he's going to throw many touchdowns. I only have him projected for 13 total touchdowns on the season. That's going to get split up across multiple names. And just to dive ahead a little bit here, Chris Olave has had a lot of concussions. He's a guy that you can kind of project to miss games. I have him statted out to be healthy, but he's a guy you can almost project to miss games. And I don't know. I thought I was going to love him statting out. I was like, man, he's the best player on this team. He's going to have a monster season. And as I did my projections, I looked at it and said, wow, I have him projected actually below Ted McMillan in terms of end of season production. And I just don't trust him to stay healthy and be productive with the rookie. Rashid Shaheed is going to do the same thing, I think, regardless of who's playing quarterback. I have him for about almost 900 yards and 3 touchdowns, just under 9.5 fantasy points a game. I think regardless of who's throwing the ball, he's going to do about the same thing. Deep threat, big play guy. He'll have weeks where he's good. Another one of those best ball guys you want to get your hands on because he'll have those big weeks. The wide receiver 3 in New Orleans is now Brandon Cooks. Very fun fact. I used to think he'd always go for 1,000 yards. I thought he had a little bit of that Mike Evans in him, but he's fallen off since then and will not be a fantasy relevant player this year. I think the biggest winner of the rookie quarterback would be Alvin Kamara. I have him for over 1,000 yards rushing and another 600 yards through the air. If I'm not mistaken, he's near the top, if not at the top, of receiving yards for running backs. I have him as my number 2 running back in terms of receiving yards behind only Devon Achane. I think he could get the ball a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of checkdowns to him. I think he's going to score more than anyone else on this team. I have him for 8 total touchdowns. I have him at 16 fantasy points a game. He is currently my RB5. Kamara is going to go much later than that. He is likely going to be one of the steals of the draft. He is a guy that will slide down the board, and people don't want to take him because he's older. Maybe this is the year he falls off. I don't think that either Kendre Miller or Devin Neal, the 2 guys behind him, are going to take enough of his work for him to not be valuable. And I think he does enough for the passing game. I have him for over 70 catches. I think he does just enough. I mean, that puts him over 300 touches on the season between rushes and receptions. I think he does just enough to be extremely good for your fantasy team. And he's a guy I will likely be targeting in my drafts. The tight ends, Juwan Johnson, and then Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is the most impossible player to project in fantasy because you don't know what he's going to get thrown into. But Juwan Johnson is still a good player. Have him for just about 6 points a game just because there's no quarterback play. He's not going to get in the end zone. He's not going to have that much going on. And I think that all the pass catchers on this team, with the exception of Alvin Kamara, really take a hit from the rookie quarterback. He's actually my lowest projected points per game quarterback this season. Second lowest behind instead of Kenny Pickett. But I don't think he's going to be very good, and I think that's going to hurt everyone on this offense. They are going to be behind a lot, so that will maybe increase passing attempts to get the ball to Chris Olave, to Rashid Shaheed. But I just don't think that there's going to be enough talent at the quarterback position to get these guys the ball. I don't think they're talented enough as pass catchers to overcome that quarterback discrepancy. With that being said, the Buccaneers are my last team. The reason why I saved them for last is because I am much lower on Baker Mayfield than a lot of people are. Also, just to mention it, Chris Godwin is coming off an injury. He is supposed to be all good to go. But that's just something to keep an eye on. He might be a slow starter to the season coming off that injury. To talk about the receivers, I'm going to actually close this one with Baker Mayfield because I do have him a lot lower than a lot of people do, and I want to be able to explain myself on that. I have Mike Evans not reaching the 1,000-yard mark this year. I have him for over 900 yards, though, and 9 touchdowns, about 12 fantasy points per game. I think he still has a very good year. I think he's still a very good player. I have him as my wide receiver 24, so my last guy in the top, that wide receiver 2 range. I think he's a very good player still. There's just more mouths to feed. The Buccaneers drafted Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State this year. He's going to come in and take some of that work. Jalen McMillan coming back after a strong rookie season last year, taking some of that work. Chris Godwin, if he's healthy, taking some of that work. I think all those guys could be good players and be successful in this offense. There's just now 4 guys, really 5 guys because of the tight end K. Dotton, who I also like a lot. Projection-wise, just about 7.8 fantasy points per game, actually behind what I have Kyle Pitts projected for, which I thought was really funny, but I have him at the tight end 20, and I think he could get 4 touchdowns. I think the touchdowns are going to get split up very much. I think Mike Evans is ahead above everybody else, but the rest of the touchdowns are going to get split up between the guys. And I think it'll just be a week-to-week basis. Who's the strongest player and who's the biggest winner of the Baker Mayfield, whatever he throws. In the backfield, Bucky Irving is firmly the one on this team now. I am for about 14.4 fantasy points a game in the PPR format. That is good for RB1. I have him as my RB10 right now. A lot of people are very high on him. I like him a lot. I don't know if I'm as high as some people, but I do like him a lot. I have him for over 1,000 yards on the ground and 9 touchdowns. I think he's going to get a majority of the work. I don't think Rachaad White is amazing. I do have Rachaad White getting enough work to remain fantasy relevant. I have him for 500 yards and 3 scores, as well as a little bit through the air, which is enough for him to be my RB31. So in the RB3 range, I think he's going to be very fantasy relevant. I don't think they're going to fully hand the keys over to Bucky Irving. I think that White is going to still have a little bit of a role on this team, and that's probably going to be annoying if you drafted Bucky Irving as your RB1, but I think White does just enough to remain fantasy relevant, and he's a name to keep an eye on as one of those top RB2s. Now, to talk about Baker Mayfield, I have him for 4,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, 200 yards rushing. The rushing number, I think, is where I'm lower than a lot of people. I think he comes back a little bit in that category. I think he has so many weapons. He wants to get the ball out. He wants to throw it. I just don't know if they throw it enough, and he does enough per pass to be extremely fantasy relevant. I think he is just not as talented as some of the pure arm passers we see that are very fantasy relevant. I have Baker Mayfield as my QB16. So I have him firmly QB2. I don't think there's anything wrong with that spot, but I think people are viewing him as a QB1 this year. I don't see that. I see there's the upside. I think if he can get the touchdown percentage he had last year, he's absolutely there. If he can run a little bit more, get in the end zone a few times on the ground, he's there. But based on my projections, I have him for 4,200 yards and 28 touchdowns. That's a good year for a quarterback. The Bucs are happy with that year. I just don't know if he's going to be as strong fantasy-wise as people are viewing him. And for that reason, I have him back a little bit. I don't think it affects the receivers. I don't think it affects the tight ends. I don't think it affects the running backs. I am just a little bit lower on Baker Mayfield than a lot of people are. Be that as it may, it could definitely come back to bite me if Baker has a big season. But regardless, I think that he's a very strong player and could do some good things. One piece of news to touch on at the end here, Stefon Diggs was reported at Patriots camp as all go. It said that he's supposed to be playing and be at 100% from the jump. We'll see as camp goes on if that is the case. If that is the case, I will update him a little bit more, give him a few more targets, move him up my wide receiver rankings a little bit. But to at least start the season, I am going to still assume that he's not going to be 100% to start and remain constant in my rankings. But yeah, that concludes the NFC South plus a little bit of Patriots news. Thank you very much for tuning in, and next time it will be the NFC East with my New York Giants as well as the other good teams. Thank you.